All right, so those are a few numbers to pay attention to. Let's talk about this in some more detail with an expert. He's joining in right now. Narendra Taneja, an energy expert, is joining in. Thank you so much, Narendra, for taking the time. Can you put this in context for us? Now, we've tried to lay some numbers down. Russia, before the war started, was a producer of approximately 12% of global supplies. What could a deal like this look like if it does go through from India's perspective?
Well, first of all, traditionally we have not been a big buyer of crude oil from Russia. When you look at the map of Russia carefully, I mean, there are some challenges. You have to evacuate Russian oil either out of, the Arctic region, which is very costly and half of the year is frozen, or the East Coast, which is quite far. You have to first ship oil 5,000-6,000 kilometers to the East Coast of Russia before you bring it home. And so, which means that you are left with what? The Black Sea, Mediterranean, and that. And that's where exactly the war is going on right now. So there are some challenges there. But that said, at the same time, I mean, I want to point, let's say we have gotten a refinery in Gujarat called Nayara Energy Refinery, which is actually controlled by a Russian state-owned company called Rosneft. And they hardly import any oil from crude. Russia's own refinery in India doesn't bring oil from Russia. The reason? Simple, economics. So Russia has made this offer, which is very good. But at the same time, I mean, those are going to be commercial decisions taken by various entities, public sector and the private sector, Indian Oil, Bharat Petroleum, Hindustan Petroleum in the public sector, and Reliance and Nayara in the private sector, largely. There are maybe other players too, small ones. So this is going to be commercial decision. Now, if you want to bring oil from Russia today, number one challenge is that, difficult to find tankers. When it comes to India, we use foreign tankers, to bring oil from different geographies around the world because we don't have much of our own fleet. 92% of India's international trade is carried by foreign ships, including oil. So you have to find tankers, and many of these tankers are actually controlled by Western companies. Then you have to find an insurer. Many of these companies are again Western, and there are no sanctions against them, but then many of them are reluctant. And then, of course, the payment part, which is still a challenge because we don't have the payment mechanism in place yet for oil. Oil globally is traded in dollars, except between Russia and China. So if we breach that, and of course, then the United States in particular, because they make a lot of money by that, they are going to protest, evidently. Now, that said, at the same time, as he said, it's a very good offer, but I'm not too sure if we'll be able to take much advantage of, simply because there are reasons in terms of logistics, there are challenges in terms of insurance and payment and so forth. And when you look at India's total consumption, we on daily basis consume roughly 5 million barrels a day. And recently we have bought from some oil from Russia at cheap rate, 300,000 barrels. That would, let's say that when you look at our total requirement, is like for 2 hours on daily basis. So it's nothing. So I think we have to look at the economics. The Western countries, for some reasons, are making too much noise on this offer made by Russia. And by the way, this offer has not been made only to India. It has been made to many other countries too. So I think offer is very attractive. In my personal view,
absolutely,
we should not spend too much time on the offer. What we should in turn be negotiating with Russia is to use this opportunity to acquire oil and gas upstream assets on the ground in Russia, so that we can buy those assets and over a period of time we bring that oil to India. I think that would be much better economics.
That's an interesting perspective, but on the topic of the amount, close to 5 million is absolutely bang on, right? 2021, the consumption was 4.76 million barrels per day. It's expected to be about 5.15 million barrels per day in 2022, Narendra. In that entire consumption, even if a deal is struck, even if increased supply is accounted for, how much do you expect it to go to if you were to say that India will buy additional or more Russian oil?
Well, usually we import roughly 86% of our total requirement oil. Let's say, for the sake of discussion, if we consume 5 million barrels a day, out of that, roughly 86% is imported. And out of that 86%, a big percentage of oil is also that we import, refine, and export to 106 countries around the world, including actually the United States. Those are products. We add, add value and then export that. Now that said, so I think, even for instance, we go for
Right.
Russian oil very aggressively. It's not going to be that easy, and the overall economics is not going to be that attractive because we have initially 60 to 70% of oil came from only from one geography, that was Middle East, so Gulf countries. We, as a part of energy security strategy, so that we don't depend
Yeah.
on any one geography, we diversified. So today, actually, one of the major exporter of oil to Russia, to India, is actually the United States. So we are buying for oil from practically all continents. That's part of the energy security strategy. We can't suddenly dismantle it or weaken it just to go for one
Mm.
geography for Russia. Even if we want to, it's going to take years before we'll be able to put in place in a manner which would be economically beneficial. So it's a lot of politics by Western countries. Criticism is unwarranted. When it comes to economics will be seen by our refiners. And my own sense is maybe we start buying instead of 1%, which is a fact today of our total requirement, we may start buying 2%, 3% oil from Russia. Even if we go very aggressively, it's not going to be more
Okay.
than 4 to 5% over
Yeah.
a period of time.
That's the perspective that I wanted. I wanted that percentage of total imports, Narendra. Could you also help us understand the broader perspective, which is that at this juncture you have a very volatile situation in terms of the demand dynamics. You have a lot of countries that are rolling back restrictions, a few that are restarting COVID restrictions, but at least India, things seem to be going back to normal. So demand is expected to come back. The question is, will the IEA release additional supplies? The latest update in a report, I think, that has come in just about a short while back, is that the IEA has agreed to another round of oil stock release. And also the US stock has to be spoken about. So how do you see the supply situation panning out in the near term?
Well, you see, IEA member countries, most particularly the United States, when they announced such a decision, which they did last night, that they are going to release 1 million barrels of oil every day for next 6 months, in order to put pressure on the prices, or the prices start coming down. That is more politics, because America is going to have elections to the Congress in November, and Biden wants to make sure that oil is off, the front page, so that, his party is back to power as far as the United States Senate and House of Representatives are concerned. It's politics. They are doing it with it. But that said, at the same time, the reason oil prices have been going up, number one, and the very important reason is the last 4 years, many in the West in particular have been demonizing oil, that oil is dirty, oil is bad, go for renewables and so on. Many of them forgetting that there is no alternative to oil for very, very long time to come. So the result is oil is heavily underinvested, which means that even if they want, the supply is going to be a challenge, especially for big importers like India. Number two, during COVID time, investment in oil actually went down even further, because many companies, they decided to go more for renewables. Some of them, they just didn't have the budget to invest in oil exploration and production. Number three, now we have seen the Ukraine war. There are sanctions on oil. There are all kind of sanctions against Russia. Those who buy from Russia, even that America is not very comfortable. So there are three major challenges. The result is, at the same time, as you very rightly pointed out, demand is coming back to normal. In fact, demand may go up, like in the case of India, by 4%, which means that India is the third largest consumer of oil on the planet, the third largest, biggest oil market in the world. So if in India demand goes up by 4%, if not 4, even 3%, that means the entire global oil industry, oil market is going to basically respond. Respond means the price is going to go up. So it's a huge challenge, mainly because the supply is going to be constrained over a period of time. And at the same time, there is no alternative to oil for the next 15 years. So that said, which means that renewable is very good, but oil we need to focus on more, because our economy is an oil economy, and world economy by and large, barring a few countries also, oil economy, the global economy is oil economy. And it needs more investment. Yes, renewable, say green energy, but at the same time, don't forget, if you don't invest more in oil, you will be compromising the transition from fossil fuel to renewable. For the transition is important, we invest more in oil. And if oil remains underinvested as it is today, it's going to make the transition difficult, and the cost of oil is only going to move in one direction, that is north.
Okay. Narendra, thank you so much for joining in and for giving us that perspective. And certainly a lot of moving parts in the crude story globally, and a story to watch out for.